everyone. A very good morning, afternoon, and evening to all of you. We'll give some time for the people to join. Meanwhile, we can start as well. So, thank you guys for joining in. And the topic for today is very interesting and is around designing best solution within your timelines. And to help you understand how to design the best design within your timelines, we have Tanmay today. Tanmay is a self-taught product designer with 8+ years of experience and 5+ years of freelancing. He's currently a product design manager at Porter. It's a marketplace for intracity logistics. He has helped companies in domains like entertainment, e-commerce, hyperlocal, B2B, campaign management, passion economy, logistics, productivity, edtech, and so on and so forth. Clearly, he has a lot of industry experience. So let's hear it from Tanmay. The stage is all yours.
Thanks, Rashida. Hi, guys. First of all, thanks for having me here. Uh, as Rakshita said, being into the last 8.5 years of industry, I've been through a lot of different domains, trying to understand what different problems they are facing and how we can create a solution or how we can create solutions that actually can help us, obviously, not just gain the best user insights or user usability things, but also make sure that the business is successful. So those two, I would say, have been a very recent shift in what a designer is supposed to do. Previously, it was only about users. Now it's also about business and product. So with that journey in mind, and obviously, I also had hiccups in the very early stages of my career where timelines meet nahi hote the. So that kind of a scenario also used to exist. So learning through that journey and understanding how we can publish things or how we can create solutions in dedicated timeline, so as to make sure that the solution that goes out is within the timelines or at least very close to, I would say, the edge part of the timeline. So I would be walking you through. Before that, I'll just briefly introduce myself. So my name is Tanmay. I, as Rakshita said, have been into industry for a long time, around 8 or 9 years now. Uh, I would say Porter's, currently I'm looking after the management of design at Porter. Prior to this, I have been with Flipkart, and I guess if some of you guys are from Bangalore, we recently launched Flipkart Quick, which is the hyperlocal division of Flipkart. That is something that I worked on completely, and similarly at Ghana and things like that. So I would say I'll be walking you through my journey there as well as the things I've learned over time. And through this process is something that I've actually customize certain things that you already have as a standard in the practice of design, but it's a bit more, I would say, customized in order to actually find solutions in proper timelines and not wasting or not having a lot of back and forth with the product team or the tech team. So before I begin, I would say if you have any questions, please do feel free to park them at the Q&A section, and we can cover those at the very end of the, I would say, not lecture, but the presentation. And if you would have let's say there would be certain scenarios where you would have thought, okay, I went through a similar journey, but XYZ things were which were blocking me from actually having the best answer out of it or having the best design out of it. Please feel free to even maybe have put that as a chat or put that in Q&A, and we can surely come back to it, and maybe I can help address those concerns and those issues for you and find a solution. So yeah, if it's all good, we can start. So yeah, as I was saying, this is I would say a very much like a bridge between the current design sprint methodology or the process that we have and the double diamond approach. So this is something which I had obviously over time understood that obviously we need to follow a lot of processes when we are working with designing a solution for not just for, let's say, the B2B sector, but also the B2C sector. But also putting on top of it a design thinking approach of double diamond, which would allow us to also control the timelines. Because as I'll go along, you'll know why we have to do it. Because a lot of us, I'm not sure, let's say, who are very new to the industry, we face that challenge when we enter the industry, that we are creating solutions, we are trying to find the best alternate or best different solution patterns, but it takes a lot of time. It actually goes out of our control and then starts impacting the timelines where the PM or things like that, things like people like those, like they tell ki yaar timeline miss ho jayegi, let's try to wrap it up as soon as possible. And that is where you have to take a lot of, let's say, usability experience kind of cuts, which can impact the user's experience on the application or the product. And that is where the problem actually starts. So this process is which I'll be covering, which actually, as I said, like is a bridge between both of those approaches and how it helps me actually solve those problems. So just a brief about double diamond approach. It allows you to validate your designs. It allows you to explore different solution verticals or areas and feel a bit more like confident with what you're going to create. Because when you, let's say, for example, what I see like now in a managerial role, like a lot of case studies focus their attention in a very waterfall model, but that's not how a designer actually thinks. When you go out, you try and understand a problem, you break it down. So that's already an exploration phase. Then you try to come to, okay, what are the exact problem statements and what exactly is the core of the problem that we're trying to solve, which is then it's not exploratory phase, it's more like a refinement stage. Then you go out, like have those problems in mind, or those core problems things in your mind, like, and then you start exploring different solution areas. So it's already not a simple waterfall model, because you will have to come back to the previous step the more discussions you have. So that is where like a regular waterfall kind of an approach does not work that efficiently with design as per se. And double diamond is more like a design thinking approach. And when it comes about design thinking, it's about like how can you take design as a decision maker. And by design, I don't mean graphical design or UI design, but design as a, let's say, a design of experiences to be the core of decision making. And this is also an approach that is used by product managers. This is also an approach used by business managers or business heads to understand and evaluate what solution would work. So since it originally comes from a design background, but I see like majority of the product managers and business heads use it more than a designer. So that is where obviously one of the biggest gaps happens. And though a designer is actually working through this model, they are not able to use it to the full potential. So that is where I like maybe like briefly give you a idea of how double diamond actually looks like, what you can do about it, and what you can actually go through it. And then I go deep down into like how I apply that onto the projects I pick. So moving on to the next page, I would say. So yeah, this is like how a double diamond approach actually looks like. So as I said, like the first quadrant, you see a divergent approach of finding what exactly is the problem. The second part of it is obviously like after discovering those problems, you define it a bit better. Because in a PRD, or let's say when you're just starting off it from scratch, because there can be two types of projects. You are given a PRD and you're working alongside that. Second is where you join a startup. PRD is the last thing that comes there. So it's more about how can you work together with the product manager? How can you work together with the business and tech teams to find solutions to the problems they are discussing right now? So that is where this definition of what problem statement we are going after, what kind of solution we are going to create, is where you try to define that problem in very clear fashion so that you can take a sign off from both the product, tech, and everyone. But also make sure that when you start off with the design process, you are very much aligned with what exactly you're going after, because those goals or those main problem areas are which would help you have better decision making when it comes to what kind of layout works, what kind of interaction pattern works, what kind of even like the technology that is going to be used. Because you see that a lot of like technology is advancing at a rapid pace. You have VR, AR right now. But yeah, that is where obviously a lot of problems do come in. They seep in because until unless you understand the problem in a very core area, it might not be the best possible situation or stage to be at to make decisions. And also like another part or key part here is that you need to get like your products or product manager or the business managers to align to the problem statements. Because that's something like we obviously as designers, okay, this is the problem that I see, this is the main situation that can arise, and I will build a solution out of it. But until unless you get a sign off from, let's say, or a consensus from the product manager or the business heads, they don't know what your problem area is. They only know, like, see, business people, they talk in a lot of profit and loss things, and which is like revenue, money. Product team, they don't work in the model of what the user is looking at. They look at, can it help me improve my metrics, or can it impact my metrics in the negative way? So you need to understand they are not actually thinking in the direction that we are thinking. So we will have to obviously like communicate in the language that they understand. Yeah. So as I was saying, like unless you get the people in the same room, let's say the product managers or the business people, to actually relate with the problem. Like for example, like a very I would say a very rough example to say is like, until unless the doctors in a room do not agree on the problem of the patient, they would go in different trajectories to find solve through their particular, let's say the person might be having a hip pain. The person can actually like, you need to agree on key, yes, hip pain is there, and then you need to dissect into what exactly is the problem. But if there's no mutual consensus there, then people would be actually trying to cover a lot of bases but not agree upon one thing, and then obviously like you will have different kind of tests and different kind of things happening. So it, like very similarly in let's say a designer's job role, you need to understand that if you are starting with a solution, the later on stages of your, let's say, journey or creation of design, you'll be taking feedback. So before that feedback stage arises, you need to make sure that yes, people are aware of the problem that we are going after, and they are agreeing to the problem we are going after. They can obviously, like, everyone will have to, okay, this is something I agree upon, but I also feel XYZ is also the problem. That's okay. But at least that core needs to be very much like, I would say, in the mutual consensus, and everyone needs to align to it. So that when you're going in that process and trying to find different solutions, the feedback that you gain is also related or coming from that thought process rather than coming from different areas. So one of the biggest problems, like I would say, like in my early stage of career, I also had was like, I was not setting up a context. I was expecting that, okay, these are product managers, these are business heads, they know what the problem is. But in reality, they don't. They see a problem, like a business head sees a problem, yeah, my revenue is going less, I need to increase that. A product manager looks, okay, I can improve the metrics of this screen, I can increase the engagement here. But what exactly is the problem a user is facing, they are not able to connect with it, because for them it's a factor but it's not the key decision making. So in order to make them aware that, okay, the feature is good, but there are certain lapses in that experiences which are not allowing the user to use it to the full potential, is where this actually, I would say, a gap appears. So that is where obviously this process actually helps you understand how to get that consensus after the definition happens, because then is where you can actually start developing different ideas, exploring different solutions, testing out maybe in wireframe stages just to understand the functionality, and then obviously like gaining feedback along the way, trying to close it. So I would say like that's where obviously a double diamond approach shines, because it sets up a stage that the first quadrant and the second quadrant, there are two quadrants of that particular cycle. So you can actually like pretty much like say, okay, the first quadrant that is here, I'll start my project here. But by the time I would say like there's a mid stage, obviously like you can know there's a mid stage, and then there's a handoff stage. So you can actually give timelines. Okay, there's a mid stage, I need to achieve this mid stage by XYZ date, and this handoff time is something that is obviously like sometimes specified by product managers. I would say majority of times those are very much like 2 दिन में हो जाना चाहिए. That does not happen, but making them aware of what exactly, like when can you deliver, that clarity of timeline would help them also get, okay, it's not a very simple problem, it's a complicated problem, or it's a very simple problem. That is an understanding they want, because they are coming with a potential, like they can come with two different perspectives, that a, the user or the user's experience designer, or let's say the product designer, whatever your role says, they're working with them to create the solution, or the other approach is they are working for them to create pixel perfect designs. So those are two different approaches that a person looks at. Like thankfully, like from our experiences, like we have understood that, so it's okay, like both of them are okay, but we need to give them a clear timeline, and that would help them plan things better. Because for them, when a release goes out, when things are being moved, they have quarterly targets, which obviously in the product new product design expectations, a design handoff is not a designer success. The new success of a designer is, are you able to deliver on the performance or the metrics that we went after? So that's which would give clarity to the product manager as well as the business team that, okay, when the product would ship. So I would say like, this is broadly like what I've covered. I'll just like, maybe like, I'll just give you a second or two and then maybe jump to the next slides. So as you can see, like on the left-hand side, it's more about finding that problem. Like it has less to do with wireframing or design or anything at all. But on the right-hand side of the quadrant, you see like majority of the things that you do as a designer about wireframing or solutioning or prototyping or even like evaluating between 2 or 3 different versions of the solution that you have, or even like arriving at user testing or finally closing off your UI. Everything like those are the parts of the second quadrant, which is like after finding or agreeing to a problem, then is where you are going after a solution. So yeah, this actually briefly sums it up. Firstly, you need to identify what thing to design, and for that you need what exactly is the problem, and how to design it right is on the right hand side. So yeah, coming to the very basics. So how do I apply it? See, as I said, like this is a scenario where I'm taking that, okay, there's a PRD available, but I also like cover with it, like when a PRD is not available, because at times a designer works with the product manager in the very initial time, or let's say from the very initial stages to come to a solution. So it's more about like, see, you are the reading the PRD part is obviously you're trying to get a gist of what is happening, why are we creating that solution, and all those different scenarios. So PRD majorly helps you cover, like gives you a gist of that. But still, like there would be, after reading the PRD, there would be areas of, let's say, contention or areas of concern which you may like as a designer might not align with, or there would be things which a PRD mentions, but you see down the road that, okay, even though our starting cornerstone was X, it is not being looked after at the entire, like from an overall holistic solution point of view. So that is where a PRD helps. When a PRD is not available, this actually still happens, but it is less documented, still in a, I would say, verbal kind of a situation. I mean, let's say when you're working with a startup, let's say, for example, you're working with the CEO directly, and that person, the CEO says, okay, we need to create a solution where the users feel more engaged with the product. So let's gamify it a bit. So A, like, why do you need gamification? B, how can it help? And a lot of other scenarios which would happen based on your products is like, okay, if I apply gamification, is it really a true story that the user would stick? So that is a verbal communication that happens in a startup, or let's say when you're working with the product manager directly or the CEO directly. Whereas when it's a bigger or a medium scale or a large scale company, things come in a much more documented format, because the time is, let's say, of the essence, and people are not available for meetings at every instant of time. So that is where a PRD is something that actually helps us bridge that gap of time, of availability. Then obviously, like once you're going through that, try to obviously what I try to do is like I understand the problem, or I would say like try to understand the complexity of the problem, because everything is not straightforward. There are projects which are obviously like patch. There are projects which are redesigns. There are projects which are completely 0 to 1 launch, and in 0 to 1 launch, it requires a lot more effort, because there can be two things. The company tried an approach before, it failed, and it's trying like we are trying to launch again. That was the case with Flipkart Quick, where Flipkart had tried a hyperlocal version, it failed terribly. So we had to learn from the mistakes that we did there. And then obviously, like I was not a part of when we failed, but trying to get a gist from every member who was available at Flipkart at that time and understand what exactly happened, having that diagnosis, and then going ahead with the solution. So that would give you an understanding of what is the complexity, like what is like the, I would say, even like the amount of problem we are trying to solve. Sometimes when we start off, it's very easy to say, let me just be a revolutionary. I'll like create a complete new experience, but maybe the company is not ready for it. So while you're asking those questions, reading the PRD, ask those questions, try to understand like how big of an effort are they trying to put, because it also comes to a part of how much effort can the tech team put in. because in a, I would say, digital product, you need the tech team to achieve your solutions. You can't keep creating different solutions, and obviously, like at some point in time, if let's say you created the best solution possible, but it takes around like 6 months to execute, the product manager would be like, "नहीं, ये नहीं हो सकता. Let's just rephrase. Like let's phase it out a bit." So that's actually something that happens. So try to get a gist of how much effort are we going to put in from the tech point of view, because that would also give you an idea about how much effort should you put in. Because there's no point you putting in an extra bit of effort every time, because you want it to be the best, but you know at the end of the day it might not like see the light of day. So you need to manage that effort also accordingly, because arriving at the best solution possible is the thing that companies go after, not arriving at the best solution possible in the best looking way. Is something like the best looking part is not something that they care about in the very initial days. That's something that they obviously evolve towards, because at the very early stages of a company they try to roll out as many features as possible, and less to do with the best looking features. The best functional features, yes, not the best looking ones. So that's like how a company is coming through it. Like, are they looking for the best design solutions, or are they looking for the best working solutions? That's a gist that you want to take from that PRD or from that discussions that you have with your leadership or the PMs. So that would set a stage of, okay, what amount of effort should I put in let's say a UI? What amount of effort should I put in UX? What amount of effort should I put in research? So that actually sets up the different parameters, and that defines obviously the complexity of a problem, because you know now ki, to achieve a amazing UI with the best intuitive designs, I need to explore obviously how different people are doing it, and maybe like let's say you need to explore through different tools like Mob in Design or things like that. But also sometimes people refer to Dribble and things like so. You need to evaluate. You need to create a repository of different solution patterns and then create a solution out of it. So there's a time involved. It's not a 1 or 2 hour kind of a job. That it will take like maybe like the best UI on 5 screens might take 2 to 3 days at the minimum, because firstly you will explore, then you'll see how that maps to your current solution. Then obviously like the solution that you have seen is not the solution that you are creating, so you'll have to remap it into the format that you are creating. So it already is going to take up a lot of time. So that would give you, like, similarly on UX front and similarly on research front, it also gives you an idea about the complexity. So that complexity would help you set up a timeline, and that is which is very important at this stage, because see, if you want to achieve things in a timelined manner, or something that the company also aspires its candidates to do, is you need to set up timelines, because the more time you'll give something, let me just explore. And if you don't set up a, I would say, end time frame to it, it will continue to take more time. You'll continuously be in a research stage, and you'll continue to design wireframes, you'll continue to do UI, and at like the problem that you will arrive at, that I arrived at, is where obviously like the closing of threads. You need to close threads. You need to start a thread, you need to go after it, you need to close a thread, then move on to the next stage. There can be two parallel threads running, but in a lot of majority of cases, if you don't set timelines, if you don't put, let's say, that quadrant approach ka timeline or a midpoint of when the mid part of the, let's say, 50% of the project needs to be done, then a lot of parallel threads will be running. It will be a very hard job to keep a tab on different things. B, your feedbacks would be all over the place, because there would be functional feedbacks. There would also be a lot of subjective feedbacks which comes from UI. So it's very essential that you set up these different timelines. So what I do is, like, I set up, obviously I know when I'm starting the problem. uh, I know, let's say I give myself around majority of times, like if it's a very complex problem, I give around 4 weeks. If it's a patch, obviously it's like 2 or 3 or 2-3 day or like a week kind of a job max. And if there is like anything which I know can be done in 2 weeks, majority of times I try to do like finish my projects in 2 weeks, at least the exploration and I would say solution forming part. The UI is something I keep separate from these timelines, is where obviously I take 2 weeks. I know that in these 2 weeks, by the end of first week or by the end of second week, I need to be at the midpoint. I need to know, okay, what the problem is. I need to get their consensus on. And it's very essential, because there's one thing which majority of designers don't, actually put a key site on is when you're asking them to give a sign off on a, let's say, a problem statement, you're in line, like you're all, in other words, also saying that freeze your PRD. Because from here, if anything changes, your entire solution approach changes. So that's where obviously this goes. So yeah, as like you need to question the PRD, ask about all the what, why, whens, and hows to arrive at the complexity of the problem. And then obviously you are trying to figure out the loopholes which are there, because no matter how amazing the PRD or the thought process is, there would still be loopholes. And it's our job to find out those loopholes. It may be user related, it may be business related, it may be, let's say, engagement related. It's not about like how I can, because like if you don't find loopholes right now, these loopholes would actually come back to bite you at the very end of it. Because these would actually be like very small problems, which if not handled at in particular time period, jo uska hai, that would start becoming a problem because people would start questioning, let's say, how would this happen? And this is where obviously, like if you don't look at the loopholes beforehand, you'll not be able to, I would say, create a framework which can handle the edge cases at the very end. So these loopholes, if even if you don't want to address them right now, you need to record them. And yeah, I was like, you need to record them. You need to understand about the edge cases which are there. You need to understand also about, let's say, there can be things that can go wrong. A famous saying is like, everything that can go wrong will go wrong. So you need to be prepared for that. So in, let's say, in design world, it can be a timeline mismatch. It can be a tech team not putting in the effort. It can be also API failing. It can be tech failing. Like there are tons of things that can go wrong in that solution. So in order to understand if this happens, because if you're creating a framework, or let's say, see, if you're creating a solution, you're not creating screens, you're creating an experience, and that experience is the framework. And in that experience framework, if a problem happens, at what stage it happens, like you'll know obviously, like if the person needs to come from a one page's landing pages is hard coded, it will have the least amount of dependencies or others. But if there's a page that is running through an API, the API can fail at any time. So how to handle that? So you will have to understand all those situations and be prepared in their framework. Okay, if this happens, what kind of, I would say, situation handling would I put in? Because if you look at the heuristics, you need to be transparent about the stage of your, I would say, status of your particular product. But you also need to be aware about, okay, if a problem happens, how do I like map it with some other way of tackling and showing the status, but still allowing the user to recover from it. So you need to apply all those heuristics in a very, I would say, thought process way from the very beginning, so that later on it's not just like, okay, at the very end of it when you're creating the UI, those heuristics need to be met. When you're starting off from that point also, you need to just start off in that direction. Obviously, like that is where I start with, okay, after finding all the problems, after finding all the different, I would say, uh, discussions and different edge cases, different horizons, I then start like very, see, I'm a very old school kind of a person. I don't go with uh, balsamic or let's say Figma to create the initial wireframes. I create very rough and quick, I would say, wireframes on my sheet of paper with pens and things like that. And be like, the reason I do it is like it's very fast. I can actually keep jumping from one frame to another. In balsamic or Figma, it takes a lot of time. Even if you're using it, it takes twice the amount of time that it would take for you on a paper. And it allows me to actually jump through a lot of different, not just solution types. I would say there's a famous, I would say, method of 8 frames, like where you put like 1 minute per frame, and that's how you create, I would say, screens. But to create a solution, like give yourself, like if it's a solution based approach, if it's not a, I would say, screen based approach, uh, give yourself like 5 minutes, try to solve that problems in the best way in the 5 minutes, create around like whatever amount of, I would say, solution patterns you can think of. Because see, what you're trying to create out of it is like every solution may not be the best one, but every solution will teach you something or the other. If you only start and just stop yourself with one solution pattern, it won't teach you a lot. Because when you create, let's say, for example, if you look at this, like even the arena of arrangement of these things. And I would say this is an image gallery, this is an image gallery here as well. So everything will have its pros and cons. You need to identify it when you're creating those UIs. Okay, what's the benefit of giving my, I would say, frames this much size? What's the disadvantage of like giving them in those small areas? So everything comes with the pros and cons set. At the end of it, these are the pros and cons which become your discussion points or decision makers when you're discussing with the product team, because they are not going to sit and visualize stuff. They need something to look at, make decisions on that. Because that's one of the problems which I had, is expecting that very similarly, like they understand things, they know about it, and then like trying to verbally communicate a design and expect that they would be able to visualize. That also does not happen. They need some sort of like maybe a wireframe just to relate to what you are thinking, how you are creating that solution. Maybe not an animated piece, but at least some sort of like layout formatting, so that they understand, okay, what is happening in different areas, how it can benefit, how it can be a problem for us. So that's where I obviously like just try to discover all the solves. And this is what I was talking about, is getting your product team, like this is that mutual consensus thing. This is where the first quadrant ends. This is where I focus my attention towards like making sure that I give them all the different solution uh, types that are available, how you can go about that, what's a success metric that you're going after, or North Star. uh, but also at this point I try to make sure that they understand that the next step I'll take is with a clear assumption that 85% of the product PRD, or let's say the requirement, is a freeze. Why it is essential, I'll be very frank with you, is see, I'm not going to say 100% PRD freeze. That never happens. No, nowhere in the industry there's a 100% PRD freeze or there's a 100% requirement freeze. Things change. Like by the time, even if you take a week more, things change in their mind and everything. What you want to make sure does not change is the core where you started. And that is where 85% product freeze, or let's say requirement freeze, is where you try and say, okay, these are the 3 or 4 different cornerstones on which this solution is based. This is where obviously, like let's say for example is we want user engagement, we want user retention, we want the users to be coming back onto the platform and utilizing our services more. And there's a last thing that we want to do is provide user rewards. So if these are the 4 cornerstones, if this is the, I would say, the core which comes as a mutual consensus, then this should not change. Anything on top of it, how to handle situations, how to handle different use cases, that can change. Because if one of these moves, your entire solution again goes back into a, I would say, solutioning process. It can no longer actually function, I would say, independently. So that is where it's very essential for us to get a PRD freeze or a requirement freeze, no matter it's a verbal one or a documented one. And then is obviously like with the different solution approaches that are documented that I have on paper, I try to like we try to sit together, discuss pros and cons. This is usually a meeting that goes around like 2 or 3 hours. It's consider it like a brainstorming session, and that is where we try to identify 2 or 3 best solution patterns that we want to take up for testing or take up for understanding what actually functions well. Because you don't want 10 to 15 different solutions going out there just to test, but you also don't want one solution to go out there just to test, because then you are not having any backup plan. So you need to have backup plans. You need to learn from each and maybe like create a solution that works efficiently as a single piece, but try to go with more than one solutions for your testing. And yeah, this is where obviously like I go into that, I would say not, the previous one was a low fidelity design wireframe. This is where I go into like high fidelity or mid fidelity kind of wireframing structure, covering all the use cases. This is like something I keep a check on, so that I create a framework on it, in order to make sure that, okay, if the network fails, or let's say, for example, some API fails, how do I handle it? Or if the user responds in a way that I don't want them to respond as, how do I nudge them in the proper direction? Because you need to provide, as I said, like heuristics wise, you need to provide a user to recover from a problem and also not punish them for whatever they did. So this is where obviously I try to cover that in all the use cases. And yeah, the edge cases, like this is majorly things which constitute around, let's say, 2 to 3% of a problem statement. There would be things which can go seriously wrong, then how does your system or how does your framework perform in that direction. Just having a brief idea about it at this stage is good enough. You're not working on designs, but a very brief idea would help you like be very refined with your thought process and be very clear when let's say, because these questions would come up when you're talking to a product manager or the business head. They're like, okay, but agar na API fail kar gaya, what will happen? Then you have to be ready with that solution. You can't say, okay, I'll get back to you, because that is where the timeline stretch. So you need to be aware of these situations. You need to be aware of how your framework would actually adjust to this problem coming. So that is which an edge case handling kind of a thing, and figuring out all the edge cases would help you out. Then is this is something which I do. Uh, this is very different from I've seen like what a lot of other people do is like I don't prototype and test on the final UI. I prototype and test on a black and white. I would say a bit more high fidelity wireframe. The reason being, what I'm trying to see is the functionality correct, because there are two stages of this feedback that I want to get. One is the functional feedback. The second is the I would say a subjective visual feedback, because visual is like some people would like it, some people would not like it. So how do we handle that? And that is where like now with these prototypes is where obviously we sit together. We okay, this is one prototype that we want to test. This is the second prototype, and that is where obviously like we have a connect with the product team. And by this time also like another thing that I had started doing like with a lot of teams is like not just the product team, we also sit with the tech team, because if there is a major feedback that can come in from the tech team that okay, this is not possible for us, I want that feedback to come very quickly. And this is where obviously like that second week is very much on the second day or a third day kind of a period. If that comes in there, I'll have enough time to actually find a way around that problem of a tech team, or find a way around that problem of a product team, and still be able to achieve the solution I want. And then obviously like, so once we do this, we feedback and we try to, this is, as I said, like this is pretty much going to be functional feedback, because they're not looking at a final UI. They are looking at a black and white wireframe kind of flow only. So people will say like I've seen people who come and say, "Yeah, color अच्छा नहीं लग रहा है, इसको pop करा दो." It is a very common kind of thing in a design field. Obviously, like yes, I've heard it a lot, but the response there is now very clear, because I have not put colors in. That's not even the intention here. So that makes it very clear. Okay, I don't want to take or any feedback that comes on UI front. I'll record it, but I don't have to pay attention to it right now. For me, right now, the main focus is the functionality going well. Is it in line with what we were thinking? And is it able to obviously garner the attention the user can have? And also, one of the advantages of, let's say, wireframe testing, or let's say a black and white kind of a prototype testing, it will give you from a contrast perspective is the piece getting the attention or trying to attract the attention in the right areas. Let's say a button works uh, and things like that. I'm sorry. So yeah, I discussed like why do it at the wireframe stage, to cut down all the noise on the UI level. You don't want that noise right now. You want a solution to be best. You don't want the UI to be best right now. That's a later feedback session. And yeah, I like, as you might have understood, like there are two feedback sessions that I take. The first one is obviously on the functionality. Now is where obviously like once we have a consensus on what I would say UIs to take forward, is where we start looking at okay, we take votings on, let's say if we took around 3 to 4 different solutions ahead, we try to take voting, okay, what works for you, what doesn't work for you, get normal feedback, also try to get votings. And this is, I guess, like also a part of design. This actually comes from a design sprint. uh, this is where obviously like people sit together and give okay, what solution pattern works for them, which they align with, and things like that, and also get reasons why it aligns with them, because there's no point in getting a vote and not understanding what aligns with them. So you need to know like if somebody votes on X or Y or Z, why did they pick? Because for you have created all three. You'll not be able to understand the difference that hugely which the other people are doing. So those feedbacks would be very helpful, because let's say finally you might pick one of these solutions, but there can be good things coming out of B or C option as well, which is not available on A. So how do you integrate? That is a big learning that you can have from there. And then is obviously like with the, if you remember, like we had recorded all our edge cases, we had recorded all our scenarios when it comes to, I would say, user flows. that is where I start creating all the user interaction patterns. Not the best, I would say, not the happy flow, but the bad flows, the things which might go wrong and everything. This is where I start setting that up, because now I'm working on a, like, I know what is working, and now I need to handle what if things go wrong and things are not working. So this is where I start setting up those interaction patterns and those, I would say, frameworks in order to tackle all those situations. uh, and yeah, that is where, like, this is where obviously my UI work starts. This is not like, before this everything was pretty much like trying to find the best solve, like firstly identifying what solve to have, then obviously like trying to find the best solve. But now I know, okay, how is the flow going to work, how do I structure it, because then this brings in another set of constraints. This brings in, is the constraint about a mobile, is the constraint about a desktop, because every technology offers some benefits, and obviously there are also cons to it. So how do you understand that particular platform and utilize it to its best potential and worst potential to your advantage, is where obviously this UI structuring starts. How do you lay out things? And yeah, and I try to lay out things as, like, as I said, like in a very black and white format, no colors, trying to see if a black and white, again, like very similar to that wireframe thing, if that works. Yeah, finalize the layout and interaction flow in black and white. uh, Things which might look ugly here are maybe like text anchor links. So in this stage, I'll just leave anchor links with underlines, very old school way of it. But because I know that later point in time when I'm working on the UI or putting a skin on top of it, I can actually remove things from here. And yeah, once I'm satisfied with this layout, or once I present it, they're okay, they're satisfied with the flow, they're satisfied with the layout structures and things like that. I've also, like, right now, if you look at it, I've still kept the color discussion and feedback out of it. And this is a continuous, I would say, stage where I keep on connecting with the product team and the tech team just to understand if that layout works for them. And that is where, like, once I get a consensus here, or I get, like, I would say, not 100% consensus, but around 70% of consensus, you go for a majority number. Like, always remember, in design, you don't go for every person. You can't satisfy every person, but you go for a majority. So that is where I start applying a UI skin on top of it. This is something that's mostly like people get inspired from Dribble or Behance or things like that. So this is the time where I actually, like, if I don't have any idea, I explore around, give some time to it, like a day at max. And then obviously, like, this is something which I start doing while having discussions with the product team and tech team to get the sign off on that black and white kind of a layout. So this is not something that waits for their confirmation. This is something, it starts or kicks off as soon as I start thinking about layouts. And I keep these things ready for in my mood board. Once they give us a confirmation, I then start obviously applying the different UI skin on top of it. And yeah, then refining. Like, this is like every designer knows this, but like then after applying the first UI skin, that is not where your job is done. I go on it, like go through it again. I would say around three different passes just to understand what can be improved, what can be improved, because that first, I would say, just like the first solution is not the best solution. The first UI is also not the best UI that you can create. If you put more passes on it, you will be able to create better UIs. And this is something I would say, like, this does not come from a UI design kind of a, I would say, background. This comes from a very digital art background, where the more passes you put on a digital design, the more improved that look and feel of that particular experience is. So I try to bring that knowledge because I love learning that aspect too. So I try to bring that here. And yeah, this is around like the final refinement stages. And if needed, obviously create UI components. Majority of times, like what we do is, like, we have design tokens available, so we just pass on those values to the tech teams. And if you're not aware, like, design tokens are the way of applying a design system on top of any, I would say, UI, and controlling it better through one. And this is something being used by Airbnb, Spotify, and a lot of others. So in majority of the cases, it's pretty much token driven. But if that is not there, let's say when I used to freelance, I then used to create obviously UI components, UI guides, so that the developer also knows, okay, what all things I'm going to refer to in this particular design. And yeah, then this is the final presentation to the tech and product. Since you have actually done a wireframe discussion or feedback, and then you have already done a black and white, I would say, solution presentation and feedback. The functionality aspects or the functionality feedback would not be something that arrives here. This is now going to be a totally a subjective visual design feedback aspect. A very minute percentage from here would be in the direction of, okay, by the time you were working there and now you're arriving here, we have changed this thought process. Can we handle it? Those situations you can keep. And now it's majorly going to be like majority of them are going to be visual feedbacks. And those can be very funny. Like I've heard a lot of feedbacks which have been like quite memeish, but also something that I've like I know like a lot of designers have heard in their career. So yeah, as like we record feedback again. Now this is more like in the UI direction. One thing very essential for a designer to understand is you don't need to, I would say, cater to all the feedbacks. You need to understand if a feedback is holding any good value, like a huge good value that it can help you achieve. Because everyone will have feedback when it comes to UI. As I said, like some people would like it, some people would not like it. So where do you put up a stand and try to get people to understand your perspective? Second, if they have a very good feedback, how can you embrace it and try to utilize it to improve your design? That's where you are currently standing. And it not only would help the experience be better, it would also help you grow as a designer. So this is like, I would say, by the time of this product design tech discussion, this is where that second quadrant actually ends of that, I would say, double diamond approach. Whatever feedback comes after this is something that at max requires 2 days of effort. It's not more than that. So you're already like you have something which you have already presented to tech team. They know your approach, so they can already get started on the structures. They will wait for the UI, so they are not getting blocked by timelines. And this is like when you're refining on that UI and things like that, it's something which is happening in parallel to the tech setting up their front, because you have already given them a presentation. They are already aware about the approach you're taking, the experience you want to create. They may not be aware about the animation, but they are aware about the solution. So it's not blocking the timelines. And the UI refinements that you do is like something that you're doing to create obviously that best intuitive experience, or let's say the best looking experience, whatever you go after. And yeah, this is, I would say, the final refinements. If needed tech talks, so this is something that I've picked up in the last 3 years of my career, is when you're creating something, try to create your own, I would say, documentation of your design decision making, because later on down the road, at times it comes in very handy, of why you took a decision that you took. Because if you're working, let's say, on a solution which is going to come back to you for patches 8-9 months later, you might not be like aware of every decision and why you took it. Or even like if a meeting was something that made you choose that decision. So just document it somewhere. So this is something that I picked up very late in my career. So I guess like from 2018 onwards, I've been documenting these. And yeah, covering all the states and then providing the tech handoff. Like this is the final handoff. This is where obviously like you're giving it the file to them. This is not where you're firstly making them aware. This is like the final handoff. And any feedback that you had gained in the UI front or any other front has already been taken care of by this stage. So this is like 2 weeks plus 3 days is where this happens for me. And yeah, majority of times, like a designer thinks their job is done here. So just like correcting the thought there, we are still going to be there for providing support, because there might be things that even we missed out on while development. They will be like pointing at you, okay, you need to give me XYZ states. You give me these colors are missing, are like these colors are wrong. Can you correct it? So you need to be there for support. And it's very essential for you, if you're a very young designer, to understand that it's very essential that you need to be there for a design QA, because a QA does not check the design pixel by pixel. A QA checks the design for functionality. It's a designer's job to actually check the design for the pixel by pixel, or let's say that look and feel of it. And yeah, then at the end, design handoff happens. This is something not a lot of companies have, but I would say any company that appreciates, or I would say gives enough attention to design, they have this process where a designer is responsible, equally responsible as a product manager. They require a designer to be there, provide that sign off to the tech team. So yeah, this is actually where it entirely ends in 2 weeks and 4 days. Yeah, that's about it. That has been, I would say, my process. I guess this is the last slide. Yes. And if like I'm quite sure like majority of you have already been following a lot of similar things, but there might be things going on. So if you would like to take up questions, Rakshita, like uh, can we go in that
Yeah,
direction?
sure. First of all, thank you so much. And before we start with the questions, I have one question for you.
Sure.
When do you think is the right time to involve like UX writers or content designers in the process?
So this is, I would say, like something, not just UX writers. I would say there are also like motion designers. So this is something
Right,
that
right.
we have identified at Portal. Like we used to include them at the very end stage where I would say a solution is
Hmm,
already ready. But
right.
the problem doing so is like they are also working with like they have to have the creative liberties to find those solutions. So once, let's say in the process that I designed and this showed, once I have those 2 or 3 different approaches ready, which is like at the end of week 1, is where obviously I'm
Mm-hmm.
standing at that midpoint. I try to get them in, try to make them aware of what is going to come because it's still not in
Right,
the final stages yet, but it gives them a gist
right.
of okay, what can I do about it? Because in that, so
Mm-hmm.
like a UX writer or a UX designer and the motion designer, they're working collaboratively to create the best experience possible. So I would suggest like at the very mid stage where you're a bit sure about what kind of approach you want to take
Right.
and what kind of support would you require from a UX writing team or the motion design team is the stage where they would also have the best, I would say, best way of spending that time in the very right manner rather than getting confused. Okay, you started with this and then you ended with that. So I would say at the mid
Right.
stage is the right time.
Right. Because I, being worked as a UX writer, I was always being involved once the UI is done. Right. And
That's I
sometimes,
know.
and sometimes
Sorry
I
from
hit
design
on.
side.
I tend to get onto my, fighting side with the design team. It's like, okay, this is not what we are trying to convey. Sometimes the space is not enough. The feel or the look when it goes, uh, it is not okay, right? And if we are being communicated in the mid stage that you said, which is right, even the designers are not very confused about where they might not, where they might need the copy, right, or whether the requirement is there or not. So I think that's the best part to be cool. But okay,
Yeah, so like
apology
this is also
accepted.
a learning. This is also something which I actually learned in my, I would say, journey at Flipkart is like where we worked with a UX writer. Her name was Novena, and like she also like got infuriated because we majority went to her with UI done. But like one thing which I actually like, see, I come from a graphic design background, and
Right.
very early, like I would say 2008 is where I started this design journey of mine, and that is where I understood okay, for me to create a final UI or even the final graphic, you need a story to tell, and that story to tell is going
Yeah.
to be written by UX writer. So we need to obviously like include them early on, but not as early that they also get confused because we are confused. So yeah.
Right. Right. Cool. I think we'll take some questions. So, Taman, any efficient research methods you follow first?
So see, there are which one teams. So in the last, I would say, last 2 or 3 years, I've been a part of teams where we have our own research teams, and
Right.
like they have helped us like gain those insights. But prior to that, there are certain things which I used to do. Like obviously, like I don't rely on surveys that much. Surveys is something that I
Hmm.
get usually from the product team or the business team to justify the use case. I try to follow like a 1-to-1 session, try to get 10 to 15 sessions flowing in that regards, try to build that knowledge base. So A, like one-to-one connects. B is something that I try to do as group sessions, or I would say, I don't know the exact name of it, but group sessions where a lot of individuals sitting together who belong to a very similar set of users try to get things
Right.
bouncing off because there are times what I've seen is like in a one-to-one session, you're asking questions, but the person might miss out on something. In a group session, that does
Hmm.
not happen because once the other person remembers something, the other person would say, yes, the person is saying correct. like I also face XYZ. And now, so you get to learn a lot more in that group session. So those I would say like the two primary things. Yeah, and if you require a very, I would say, in the usability side of things, it's a different thing. But to understand a problem or see if the problem actually exists, I try to find obviously like different Reddit groups which are pretty active in their own community, and try to post questions there like very quickly to get a glance. I can give them like multiple days because Reddit community is very active in a lot of areas, so
Right,
they
right.
can give a much clear answer very quickly. Obviously, it's not something I can completely rely on, but it can be the first step in like how can I proceed further in that one-on-one discussion or let's say a group discussion.
Okay, the second one is around the same lines which we just discussed about how we choose the right research method. As in, efficient is another, as in right research method, uh, depending
I
on the
understand.
project or the product.
Yeah. So I would say, yeah. So I would say like, see, based on the product requirement, this also totally depends on the requirement. So as I said, like there can be different types of solutions that you're going after. Majority in my career, like I worked on around like 40% of my career has been into 0 to 1 launches. So it had a lot to do with market research also to understand what exactly is required, because there was nothing out there and we were trying to build something from scratch. So there, like I had to obviously like go about like have as I said, like a Reddit kind of quick research done. But then it set up a stage for I would say solutioning me what exactly do we require. And not it this is like less to do with the UI patterns I'm going to use. This is more to do with the UX patterns that I want to take up. Let's
Right.
say, for example, I was working on a crypto app, and one of the things which we identified was, let's say, Wazirex is one of the top, I would say, crypto trading platforms. So the very easy approach or the question they asked was like, can we just copy and paste the very same thing? But the question that I had obviously asked them is like, how do you know that is working for them? So
Mm.
in order to understand it a bit better of what exactly is the problem there, I had to obviously go ahead, see other platforms, obviously like what their methodology and their design patterns are, the solution patterns are, but also then go into the community, ask about different questions, as I said, like in Reddit, try to understand, give them very like a very rough wireframe solution, and like if this is how you add the money and how like would it be, you get a lot of feedback, a lot of good feedback, a lot of negative feedback, and you then try to garner, okay, from an experience point of view what can work. In the meantime, you're also getting data about is it even expected by the users, because you would also get feedback कि इसकी क्या जरूरत है. So those would also give you like insights. You can connect with that person directly and ask like why exactly that person is thinking that way. So that helped me understand a bit more about the experience that I can deliver. And when it comes to market study, obviously like there are things which a designer can do, like a product designer is no longer expected to know the, I would say, complete research methodologies, but they
Mm.
need to be able to get a basic level of research done and the required level done. And if required, obviously like right now you have research teams, you have research agencies which help you with a lot of heavy data lifting. And that is where obviously like you can connect, okay, you have a gist ready, but you know ki market may the understanding that we have of the market may not be on the right track. So how
Right.
do I leverage the market teams or agencies in order to get me those insights in a much better way? So that is like I would say the right approach. Not take everything on yourself. Try to understand at what stage your particular expertise ends, and you can actually leverage the help of someone else. It's good to ask for help. I guess like this is something from Burnt movie. It's there is courage in asking help.
Right, right. Rightly said. Okay, next one is an easy one. What is usability testing in UX?
Cool. I would say like it's a very easy one. I'll like try to answer it in a way which might be like different from a lot of other people. Like I would say there are tons of YouTube people, so you can actually like see what usability is. But see, when you're building solutions in terms of let's say experience mapping, I won't go in UI, I won't go in other things. I would go in experience mapping because it's a totally UX driven thing. So in UX, for example, a photo can be open in hundreds of different ways. what actually works better, because in usability testing you want to identify a what is requiring the least amount of effort from the user, b what is the
Mhm.
most easily understandable, which is like telling you the intuitiveness of that thing. And that could also be measured through obviously like time a person takes, the time it takes for them to understand that feature, the time it takes to actually connect with the feature, and also like is the user going to come back to this, because there are certain UX, I would say, experience maps which have a wow factor to attach to it. Like very similar, like
Mhm.
very good example of it is like Cred and the way they use micro interactions in their things, as well as Swiggy and the way they actually bind things together.
Yeah.
And whereas there are things which are very going to be very official in nature. They are going to be B2B products as well. It does not mean they do not have wow. They might
Mhm.
have wow, but on a much more different way. Because on a B2B manner, they are not looking for animations. They are looking for numbers. They
Mhm.
are looking for logistics, like real time. Like for us also, like the enterprise editions are much more catered towards like how I can give them the right information quickly. So that is where the usability testing helps you understand, like, is this experience map able to justify the needs of a the current audience, b are they having that wow factor, are they going to come back to the platform because of it, and c obviously like the UI part of it is very different. I would say usability
Mhm.
study or usability testing of a solution can happen, but the same UX can be built into like hundreds different UI. So how can you identify if a UX, because a UX can be built in 100 UIs and there can be 100 UXs. So what UX to take up? That is where
Mhm.
obviously this question would actually, I would say, suffice. And this is, I guess, like in our, like when I was actually presenting that wireframe prototyping is which I utilize to come up with different UX patterns, not UI patterns, but different UX patterns to identify like how can I help the user reach the information they're looking for, or the, I would say, also the stage they're looking for in a much more intuitive way, without requiring a lot of hand holding. Because the worst part a UI can actually, or a UX can actually do, is rely on shepherds or rely on like things being taught on an interface. So how can I do it without it?
Okay, I think there are no more questions as of now, but I would want to pick your brain one last
Sure,
time. Okay,
sure.
it's again regarding the thing I've worked upon. So, uh, I've been wondering, and I've tried also to incorporate, UX writing somehow into design systems. And since the content design terminology, it's like after Facebook implemented or changed the name of the team, it's been like quite hyped and all, and
Mhm.
people are talking about content design systems. So still, I believe up to a certain level, you can incorporate it, like setting the tonality, the voice, and fixing the buttons and everything. But up to what extent do you think will it be helpful for a designer rather than just working on lorem ipsum and working on real design copy? Is it gonna save time or uh, since we are talking about within timelines, so is it gonna save a time for the writers as well and the designers as well? What do you think about it?
I got your point. So this is something like I would say lorem ipsum is something that I used in the first 6 months of my career. Post
Right.
that, I've been actually using real copy. Reason being, like one of the advantages that I saw was a if you're putting a real copy in, you're able to understand the real, actually the real picture of the real estate available with you. Because previously, like when I used to put in lorem ipsum, it's like just put a paragraph in, there would be 2 3 words coming in. But once you put the
Right.
real data in, things move like haywire. And that is like something which is very hard to control if you take lorem ipsum and continue with a solution for a very long time.
Right.
That's one, like tonality part aside, like, but understanding, like let's say for example, let's say Duns or Swiggy, there are different delivery stages attached to it. If you just put okay
Right.
lorem ipsum, there would be an illustration and go. Okay, it's good to actually
Mm.
set up a frame if you are just like quickly jumping out of it in the first 5 minutes or so. But if you're going to spend like, let's say, if anything above 5 minutes, it needs to be a more realistic approach, because that would a give that page when somebody's looking at it a much more clear idea what is
Mm.
going to come here. Because
Mm.
at every point in time, a designer would not be in the room to explain the design. like
Right.
there would be links which are shared, like Figma links are shared these days across teams where they provide feedback. If you put lorem ipsum, the first question is what is this? So it's very essential that your design is able to uh, answer
Communicate or
its
speak
own
for itself.
reasons without even you being in the room, because this is something that I remember, like one of that the same crypto person like I worked with, the person said like the design is like they were trying to obviously break apart the design, trying to find a different way, but the best feedback or the best I would say appreciation a designer can get is like even though the design is not here, the design itself was able to withstand
Speak for
across all the different questions asked, and that can only happen if you have realistic copies. It cannot happen with a lorem ipsum.
yeah, correctly said. I think you, the one designer I agree with. For rest, I share a great remorse with them.
Sorry for the copy one.
And the other bitter relationship is generally the handoff to developers.
So
That's
yeah, like
also
I would say like that's also something that the design team, I've like the teams I've been a part of have been also like affected by. See, I come from an engineering background. I've been like
so am I.
in the first 1.5 years, I've been a developer in HTML, Python, and a lot of different tech. So coming from that knowledge and obviously then arriving at design stage, like now, like I know like how to as a developer how I structure things together there, and then you create designs in a very simple way, like similar way. Because one thing which in Figma, like it has been there from like a lot of time, like the auto layout function. Auto
Right.
layout function right now is being used as a way of arranging things, but it not just like arranging things on design, but once a designer, like what I like the at Portal, like what I help my team understand is like that actually is a way for you to think like a developer, because that is
Hmm.
the structure that they can deploy. They have flex boxes, they are giving that functionality to us because it's built on
Right.
React. So how can you use it as a way of communicating better with your developers? A secondly, like it's very like you don't need to know HTML.
Hmm.
Like this is a very common discussion, like should the designers know HTML or coding? You don't need to know the HTML aspect, but you need to know the I would say the ins and out of different tech. Like for iPhone, what can happen? For a web, what is the functionality or limitation? That would give a designer a bit more clarity about how much I can extend this solution. Because once you know, as I said, like on a platform, it comes with a pro and a con set. This is that understanding of a pro and a con, because this would also help you understand how much you can leverage from the platform.
Right.
So that is where obviously like a dev understanding and a gap which exists in the I would say industry right now, but it's slowly being bridged with the help of obviously design tokens is one of the bridging patterns where a design team can also now control, because a big question is ye color kahan se aaya. So if that
Right.
is
Right.
going to happen, a design token actually would actually stop that from happening. Another part is obviously like having those I would say monthly or bi-weekly connects with your tech team, at least with the person that you're working with, so that you can understand their perspective. They can easily be able to come to you and talk to you, be approachable, and see you. It will create a repo where you can say, "Bhai, chota sa tha, kar le yaar." So that kind of repo would actually help you create that understanding that okay, that developer would also be aware about how much passionate are you about creating a solution. And once they
Right.
see that passion, it can also like I would say go across, and they can also feel okay, let me just try something out of the box here. So that actually helps create that culture where a designer and a developer and a product manager, at least like that's what we try to do at Portal, is they're able to connect not just as professional colleagues but also as people who are passionate about tech.
Right. And since I'm also from an engineering background, I did front end development for 3 4 years. And I think that the
Nice.
gap that you're talking about, bridging, it's because of engineers moving to design. So-
But those people now have an edge. They can help the other people understand,
Right.
okay, this is not the way, this is the way.
Right. Cool. I think thank you so much, Tanmay. And this was a really, really great session, and I enjoyed talking to you, speaking to you. Thank you so much
Same here. Same here. Thanks for
taking out
having me.
time on a Saturday.
Same here. Thanks
And
for
I
having
think
me, and thanks for all the questions that
everyone
you gave.
loved it. Cool.
That's great. That's great to know. Thank you, guys. Have a nice day.
Thank
Sorry,
you.
have a nice weekend. Like, go enjoy, chill out,
Yeah,
and yeah, grab a
yeah.
beer if you want. Cool,
Oh,
guys.
of course,
See ya.
sure.
Bye
Okay.
bye.
Bye bye.